Obviously, we can't go into as much depth as I would like. We simply don't have the time. So, disease and bugs, they're two indicators to garden health. Now, just because you have disease and just because you have bugs does not mean your garden is unhealthy. Most gardens out there are going to have that. You know, not to sound like Thanos from the Marvel movies, but bugs are inevitable. Disease is inevitable. The closer you live to a wild, untreated area, the greater the likelihood you're going to get that. If you have somebody who isn't a gardener, they don't care about their garden, and that's fine. They may not notice they have aphids, and the aphids may come onto your property because you have a ton of selection. So when we look at overall garden health, we're looking at performance. You can have bugs and you can have disease in your garden, but your garden can still be performing really well. And that comes into the biodiversity. You walk through a forest, it's lush, there's a canopy, it's healthy, it feels good. But if you really start paying attention, you're gonna see aphids, you're gonna see webworm, you're gonna see black knot, but they're fitting in. Now, every once in a while in nature, things can get out of hand, especially a non-indigenous disease or bug. But for the most part, we're not talking about ones that aren't indigenous. That's a whole other problem. We're talking about ones that we've been dealing with for, centuries. When you look at the garden, you want to look at your root structure. Is the plant growing well? Are the roots healthy? When you pull your annuals out in the fall, did they develop a nice, good root structure? Are the roots still white? They'll be stained brown by the earth, of course. But are they still nice and white and healthy? Or did they get black? Is there a rot there? Cleanliness. Is the overall garden clean, or is it piles of leaves everywhere, grass clippings, dead heads, a compost pile that isn't composting, it's stagnated? Those are all things that can attract bugs and disease. Soil quality. We've talked at length about amending soil. We've talked about it when we talk about trees, perennials, annuals. So what is the quality of your soil? Is it rich? Is it healthy or not so much? Moisture content. Does the ground hold the water but allow it to drain? Do you have dust and moss, like you've got a swamp in one area and a dust in another? That again is going to affect overall health. And is it maintained? Is it being checked upon? Is it being pruned? Is grass being cut, weeded? All of that. And that is the overall picture of garden health. And it doesn't have to be a heavily manicured garden. You can have lush, full, prairie, wild cottage gardens where everything kind of just finds its place that are still extremely healthy. So just quick, I'll give an anecdote. A number of years ago, I moved into a place and you couldn't even, without a trained eye, so Jenny and Harry, for example, had no idea there were garden beds. They thought it was just lawn for the amount of grass and weeds into it. And when I went out and looked, got everything moved in, then I thought I'd go check out the garden. And it was dead. There were piles of leaves. It was full of slugs and aphids. And it was bad. The soil, the top was just baked dust clay. And then when you managed to dig into it, it was just lifeless. There was nothing to it. So I spent one season cleaning it up. Didn't plant anything. I weeded, I amended the soil, I treated the bugs, kept going. By the third year, the garden was full of pollinators, and I had a good balance of centipedes and ladybirds. Dragonflies were coming to visit, and everything was thriving. So even if a garden is in bad condition, or if something is happening that we don't like, we can absolutely bring it back. It can be tough. We may have to eradicate plants. We may have to cut down trees. It may take a long time, but we can get it there. So, excuse me, lots of coffee this morning. And of course, I brought coffee and didn't bring water.
No.
I do that more often than I care to admit. But anyway, moving right along. Diseases. So when we get to bugs, we're going to talk about good bugs, bad bugs. There's no such thing as a good disease. There's no disease where we're like, oh, that's good, I'm glad that's in there. All the diseases are going to be detrimental. Fungal diseases are common, but we shouldn't mistake a fungal disease for a fungi. So if you're growing mushrooms, we have mushroom kits. If you're growing a mushroom in your garden, that's good, that's healthy, it's diverse, it's part of the system. It actually helps plants pass nutrients around the gardens. A fungal disease is like a powdery mildew. Bacterial diseases are common, and physiological disease is common. And a lot of times when it comes to disease, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So being able to prevent a disease from, oh my God, you like this? That's why I love Brandy. Thank you, Brandy. Being able to start and not have the disease in the garden, cleaning it up in the fall, cleaning it up in the spring, that kind of idea goes a long way to mitigating those diseases getting in. And like I touched on, you may need to remove plants, but keep your plants healthy. A fertilizer program, amending the soil, making sure about the moisture content, fertilizer. Having a healthy plant goes along, like keeping ourselves healthy. If we get run down, we're not eating properly, we're not sleeping properly, we are much more susceptible to getting sick than if we're actually looking after ourselves. So if we think about that, a garden is a living thing, and we equate, if we keep ourselves healthy, we do better, it works for the garden. So some common fungal diseases a lot of people will have seen. Powdery mildew. That's where you get the white splotches all over a leaf. Black knot, I've already touched on that. That's that thick black growth we see on branches, specifically on pitted trees. Cherries are bad for it. Black spot, it's just a black spot on the leaf. Rust, it's a rust spot or a rust patch on the leaf. Root rot. A lot of times we don't know it's root rot until we dig it up. We eliminate everything else, or we get some big indicators. Like you have a plant, something's happened. A common one I see is a neighbor did some work. They renovated a house or they did landscaping. The grading is now off, and an area that used to be well drained is now sitting in water. So the moisture content is up there. Things aren't draining and the plants are suffering. And botrytis blight, which is very commonly seen on peonies. That's why I included it. A lot of people don't know the name of that one. The other names a lot of people recognize. They go, oh yeah, I've heard of that, I've got that. Botrytis blight basically kills the flower bud, the stem, everything holding it, and just won't let the flower bloom. How do we treat a fungal disease? So pruning out the infected area can work. And that's especially seen on trees with black knot. We go in, we look at the branch, we trace it back, we prune properly. We touched on that with trees. We get rid of it. We don't put it in the garden, burn it. You got a fire pit, throw it straight in the fire pit. Get rid of it, eliminate it. Do not put it down in the garden, it will spread. Avoid dense wet mulches. Fungal diseases, you know, just like fungi in the house, a mildew, a mold. If anybody's ever done a renovation in a house, I did contracting as well years ago. We'd go into places and you'd find mold in the bathroom or in bedrooms. Well, I found one time, wow, I said I wasn't going to digress, but this is a funny story. Went into a place and there was a bad smell. We're looking around, we can't find it. Finally, we track an area where the smell was really bad. So we get our hammers and we rip down the drywall. There was a leaky pipe. Instead of fixing it, I don't know the logic and I couldn't ask anybody. They put a pillow in to absorb the water. We pulled that drywall down, then we went and got ventilators. We were pulling out the pillow and there were blooms of fungus coming off it. Yeah, it was the stench in it. It was not good. But it's in a wall, so it's nice and tight and concealed, and it's got constant moisture, but it's not saturated. Ideal breeding ground. Same with your garden. Treat early. If you know that your neighbor has it, or you had it last year, or you believe your plant is susceptible, treat before you see the signs. Don't wait. A lot of the fungicides you're going to use, they're preventative, they're not curative, which means if you have powdery mildew on a leaf, spraying the leaf isn't going to stop that. It's going to stop it spreading. Spraying your spray like a Defender, which one's this? Garden sulfur or the Bordeaux copper. You spray that on the problem, but also on all of the new leaves to prevent it spreading. If you've got 3 roses, one has it, you want to be spraying the other 2. So it's highly preventative. Be aware of existing problems. So look around. Does the neighbor across the street or next door have this? And use it. And I see people, they go out and they're doing the garden and then they water and they go out and do it. It needs to go on dry circumstances directly onto the problem. If there's a film of water, it's not going to get to the problem. And you want to do it well before you're going to water or before it's going to rain. And be aware, some plants cannot be saved. They're going to be, it happened to me last year. I went away and somebody else was looking after my garden and they didn't treat my cucumbers like I'd asked them to. There was powdery mildew and I came home and it was bad news. Doing all that, and another good thing is when you are watering, we can't do anything about the rain, but when you're watering, try and keep the water off the leaves. Again, we're trying to keep them dry, like any kind of fungus. The next slide, if you look at it, you'll notice, very importantly, I didn't change the picture.
Oh, that's not a disease?
It is, but that's the one we just talked about. Oh, okay. That's botrytis.
Oh.
Man, if you didn't notice, I shouldn't have said anything. I mean, I did change the picture. That's a different thing. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you're doing a massive PowerPoint and you're all over the place with your images. I was actually going to include a picture of fire blight because that really leveled Calgary a few years ago, especially in the cotoneasters. Cankers, abnormal growth, especially in trees and shrubs. Wilt, and not just when a plant is wilting because it needs a drink. That's a physiological disease. Wilt is where the plant, no matter what you have done to it, it's in full wilt, the stem is mushy, the roots aren't good, you got to get rid of it. Galls, again, that's the buildup, it's an abnormal growth. Soft rot, you see it a lot where a stem starts turning mushy, bad smell to it. A lot of times you can try pruning it away, but it is in there. It's a bacteria. It's just going to come out in other places. And scab. Potatoes, root vegetables can be very susceptible to those bacterial diseases. How do we treat a bacterial disease? There's no actual treatment. People come in with a bacterial disease and they will try a fungicide. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can have a bacterial disease and that's weakened the plant, and now a fungal disease has also moved in, or an insect has moved in, but this is not going to treat a bacterial disease. It's like when we get sick, is it viral, is it bacterial, what's going on? Antibiotics might not work, so same thing with plants. Prevention, therefore, if we have no real preventative or curative measures, prevention, physical prevention is the key. And that is utilizing resistant strains. You know you're in an area where you have this problem. Look for the strains. Come in and talk to us. Ask around. A lot of times I don't know them off the top of my head. Somebody asks me and I'll have to go look it up or read on it. I'm lucky I've never had a yard massively infested by bacteria. But again, preventative, keeping it clean, pruning. If I do see a problem, I eliminate it immediately. That kind of thing. So I've never really had that problem. Crop rotation is a good idea. Don't allow the bacteria to establish a colony. The potatoes get scabbed, next day you put peas there, or you put tomatoes there, the potatoes go elsewhere. Or leave it fallow. Don't do anything for a year. Then the bacteria has nothing to get to. Like I said, pruning can help. It's certainly worth a try. You've literally got nothing to lose. So it's not a bad idea to do it. Promote overall health. Again, water properly, fertilize, deadhead, keeps the weeds away, let the plant, good air circulation, let the plant get what it needs. Having that overall robust health at the beginning is key. Keeping the leaves, stems, fruits as dry as possible. I see a lot of people when they water and I can do that too. It's awesome. The plants look amazing. The sunlight's catching the drops on the tomatoes and you're taking pictures and you're sharing them. You're like, ooh, look at this pretty picture. I love it. I do it all the time. Absolutely guilty. But if you have a disease, it's not great. The roots are the only thing that need the water. It can be beneficial to the leaves, wash them off, cool the plant down, etc., etc. But they don't need the water. The roots need the water. And if you're fighting a disease, you want to have every tool in the toolbox available. And working on the plants when it's cool and dry. So this is next to impossible on the East Coast where it's so humid. But what that means is when you're going out and you're harvesting and you're pruning and you're cutting back and whatnot, you've got all of those open ends and cut parts and cut branches, and then you go out and you water it. Now you've introduced moisture, and disease can thrive in moisture. So early in the morning when it's cooler and it's dry and whatnot, go out and do all of that work. It does help. Absolutely. And again, it's not always possible. And sometimes we have to try massive amounts of different methods. Sorry, just organizing this quickly, in order to keep our plants healthy. So physiological disease, physiological disorder, kind of called both things. It's the easiest one to treat. We get people who come and they're like, my plant isn't doing good. Oh, it's too wet, it's too dry. There's not enough sunlight. It has a calcium deficiency. All it means is that somehow what is the ideal growing conditions for the plant are not being met, however that might be. And again, think about it like us. We may not feel great, but then we realize, oh, wow, I've been really busy and all I've eaten is junk food for a week. I haven't given myself any fresh fruit or vegetables or vitamins. All I've been living on is coffee and cereal. I don't know anybody who does that. No, I don't anymore. Now I'm very responsible. When I was younger, coffee and cereal, very healthy, balanced diet. And then by the end of the week, I am craving some fresh fruit or vegetables because my body is like screaming out for it because I've let myself get deficient. It's the same with plants. SADS disorder. There's another great example so that we can equate what I'm talking about. People in the winter who actually have a deficiency, they're not getting enough sunlight, and it does affect them. Same kind of thing. Or environmental requirements are not being met. We change that, we fix the disorder, just like that. So those ones, they're worth noting and they're worth looking. And we all try and cheat it. I've absolutely tried to cheat it, where I'm like, this plant needs part sun. This area might be part sun. And a year and a half later, I'm like, it is not part sun, and I'm moving the plant. So keeping an eye out for things like that, how the plant is responding to an area, especially if you know you've cheated it, goes a long way. And that's also very commonly seen. Physiological is probably most easily recognized in houseplants, with overwatering, underwatering, too much light, not enough, those succulents that are stretching across the room trying to find light. So that kind of gives us a little bit more into disease. Again, can't go into everything, but we will have questions and we will take emails and whatnot as well. Now we talk about bugs. And bugs they're great. Bugs, they fascinate me. They absolutely fascinate me. I take too many pictures of them. I get close to them. I want to know what they're doing. And knowing the difference between a good bug and a bad bug in the garden is essential. And I am talking about what is good for the garden, not what is good for us. You may not like spiders. I definitely do not recommend killing them in your garden. They are a fantastic predator, and they can give a warning sign. You see some aphids, you don't have to go and spray your entire yard with trounced. There might be ladybirds moving in on them, and you kill the ladybirds, but you don't kill all the aphids. So learning what you're looking for with bugs and learning the reaction and how you're going to work around them is essential to understanding it. Because if you remember, at the beginning, what we mentioned in the overall health of a garden is biodiversity. And that's key. And it's one of the things I love about a garden. A healthy garden is diverse. It has trees, it has annuals, perennials, shrubs. It's got weeds. It has bugs, good bugs, bad bugs. Everything is happening. There's birds. If you have bad bugs, birds will come into your garden to eat them. So now you've attracted birds. Bird song makes us feel better. So there is so much to be said. Farming diversity is key. Honestly, in my life, you come into my office at any given moment, I'll be listening to classical music, jazz, punk, grunge, whatever, because I love a broad range of music. I don't want to just listen to one genre. I want to see it all. Movies, I'll watch a ton. Food, I'll eat a ton of things. So much like how we have enjoyments, that's what a garden needs in order to be robust and healthy. So when we talk about bugs, okay, again, not to sound like Thanos, but they are inevitable. We are outside, and a sterile garden is an unhealthy garden. And bugs are great indicators of health. Bad bugs and good bugs are an amazing indicator of the overall health of the garden. You see wasps swarming around a tree, you're like, I need to get rid of the wasps. The wasps are probably telling you there's aphids in the tree. The aphids are pulling out the sugar, and the wasps are stealing the sugar. So that is giving you an indication that there is another problem. The problem isn't the wasps. And I'm not talking about a big wasp's nest overhanging your barbecue or your deck. Again, that's a different issue. I'm talking about using these as warning signs of what else is going on. No need to panic. Last year, I was on my deck, and I saw a cool bug. So I'm taking pictures, and I happened to see on the plant aphids. And I was like, oh, I got aphids. All right. Didn't spray, didn't do anything, didn't touch them. I checked my tomatoes. Now I was more vigilant. I checked things very carefully. I had no aphid infestation in my garden, but I know there were aphids in my garden. But there were other bugs eating the aphids. So I didn't have to worry. Everything worked the way I wanted it to. And that's where observing comes in. Keep an eye out for that. Look at your plants. Take the fun picture. Because I took the picture of the cool bug, and then I was editing it, and I was like, oh, look at it. And I was like, aphid. Oh my God, there's an aphid hiding there. And that's what tipped me off. Most bugs, easily treatable. There's chemical sprays, there's biological options, there's preventative measures. There are a ton of ways that we can take care of bugs. And it's the type of bug we want to do. Okay, so now it's bad bugs.
I know, look at that picture.
I know, right? That's a aphid. I drew that.
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't. But thank you for immediately pointing that out, Brad. Thank you for not believing that for 1 sec. I drew that. You're like, no. I've seen your drawings, Colin.
Yeah.
In a million, yeah. I could have nothing but paper and pen and copy that, and I would never get it. No. Ever. I might get better, but I would never get that. Aphids. Everybody knows them, even if we're unsure exactly what they look like. The vast majority of gardeners know the name. They are one of those instant pests. You hear people say aphids, you're like, oh, yeah, I know what an aphid is. I know what it's doing. And individually, they're tiny. When they cluster around a stem or down a leaf, that's where you've really got your problems coming in. They literally poke their nose in and they pull the sugar out of the veins. So your plant is photosynthesizing and it's like sending sugar to the roots. The aphids are like, no thanks, no thanks. And I'll take that. If ever you see ants swarming all over a plant, it's a good sign you have aphids. I don't age myself here. I don't know if you guys remember the animated movie Ants. It came out when A Bug's Life came out. They go to the bar, and the ants are at the bar, and they ask for a drink. The drink they get is a bug. That bug is an aphid, and on it is sugar, and the ants drink it, and they put it down. That's where it came from.
Is it actually?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, I have to see that movie
Yeah,
again.
100%. If you look at that scene, it's the Sylvester Stallone character and the Woody Allen character, and they're in the bar talking, and they get a beer, but it's an aphid. And I noticed that immediately. I'm like, oh my God, that is so cool that they put that in. Obviously, somebody knew that, and they worked it into the movie, and it was really fun. Aphids can be a myriad of colors. And what you'll see is you'll see the leaf curl up, aphid curl. It looks almost kind of like it's turning into a broccoli. And you'll also see stunted fruit and flower development because they're impeding the sugars. So those sugars are going for development, and they weaken the overall plant. Other pathogens can get in because the plant now can't fight them off. If the plant gets damaged, it can't heal itself as quick. So aphids can be a real pest. Chemical spray, ladybirds, takes care of them. They are very slow moving. You can also spray them with water. They fly away, but they will come back. Spider mites. Oh, they're pesky little critters. They are an arachnid, tiny, microscopic little red things. Quite often you won't see them. You'll either see spots on the leaf. Some people mistake it for rust. It's not, it's a dead spot. They don't eat the sugars. They actually pull the chlorophyll out. They're so tiny, they actually pull it out of the cell. Good way to notice them is spider webs on your plant, but they're not spider webs. They're just the filament, they're the strands, and the spider mites do indeed produce them. And again, they just weaken the plant because they pull out the chloroplast, so they're limiting the plant's ability to photosynthesize, and then the plant gets more and more weak, can't produce the sugars that it needs because now photosynthesis is being impeded. So again, it's that overall health. Very rare that it's going to kill the plant outright, but it weakens it so much that the plant can't stand up for itself. And why are we growing a tomato to not harvest the tomatoes, basically? So, moving right along, slugs and snails. I have to put snails in there. They're basically the exact same thing, but snails got hella better PR.
Yeah.
Somebody put like a little house on their back and people were like, snails. Slug! Snail. Same thing, they're a gastropod. But the PR, it's wild. It's funny. And don't get me wrong, I actually find slugs fascinating. Yeah, if you've ever been to BC in the forest, you see the big suckers like that.
Huge.
Yeah, they're wild. You ever picked one up?
No.
Oh, they're so cool. They're so good. And then their eye stalks come out and you scare them and they go back into their head. They're wild. They're great animals. The problem is they are voracious when it comes to eating plants. If you've ever had hostas and slugs and snails, you'll know what I'm talking about. They will literally take a hosta down to nothing overnight, depending on the infestation. They're relatively easy to prevent. They like areas where wherever a fungus will live, a slug and a snail will live. They love piled up leaves with the dampness in them. And they actually have a purpose in the garden as well. They will help matter decay because they'll eat all kinds of things. The problem is they're opportunistic. Do they want to eat like a gross dead leaf, or do they want to eat your wickedly healthy hosta? That's where they come in. So they're like, oh, yeah, I'll save that for later. It's like you go grocery shopping and you've got a kitchen full of food and you're like, we should order a pizza. That's basically the slug and snail. They're like, oh, look at all this stuff we could eat. Hosta. And they go out for a night on the town. I should have put a top hat on my slug. They'll absolutely chew through leaves. It's just massive physical damage they'll do. There is a treatment for them. This is one treatment that I have to say, be very careful of if you have pets or wildlife, because it will hurt them as well. Little tip I like to give. I normally don't give tips like this because if it's not done properly, it can cause damage. Like I'm not going to say Christmas trees. People go, well, can I just pour Sprite in the base? You can pour whatever you want in the base. It's your tree. I won't recommend it because I don't know what the ratio of Sprite is. If the Sprite starts gunking up the capillaries, it can't pull moisture up, so it's going to dry out more. So I don't know what that is, so I won't recommend that. This, however, I will recommend. It's really easy, and it does no damage. It might get your pet drunk if your pet goes for that kind of thing. If you have a massive slug or snail infestation, take a sour cream tub, Tupperware, anything like that. You want it relatively shallow, a couple of inches. Sink it down to ground level and fill it with beer. You don't want it to be like some like cool craft beer, nicely chilled. You want a real stinky, skunky beer, nice and warm, because the smell attracts them. They go nuts for it. I coined the term slugweiser because we used to do it in the gardens back in Montreal. It was very hard to look professional walking through somebody's garden with a bottle of beer, but we were honestly filling up slug traps. And it's to the point where you can be emptying it every day, straight into the compost. And if the birds come down and the birds eat out of it, they might get you a little buzz, but it's not going to hurt them. So that's a method that works really, really, really well. The slug bait works phenomenal. But if you're worried about, if you have a fish pond or a curious puppy, or there's tons of birds in your garden, you might not want to use it. The beer method, all you're going to do is you're throwing a party for your friends. There you go. The birds want to get drunk. Scale insects. So this, if you remember when I love how I say if you remember, like I'm doubting everybody's memory of like 20 minutes ago. Well, if you remember back 20 minutes ago, when we talked about fire blight and the fact that I hadn't changed the picture because I'm not very good at things, the fire blight, and I don't know which order it happened, but the fire blight and the oyster scale were ravaging the Cotoneaster hedges. Now, I believe the scale came in first, weakened the plant enough that the blight came in. It easily could have been the other way. If anybody does know, hey, let me know. Because I've never been able, everybody I've asked and everything I've looked at, including the city of Calgary, nobody could give me a definitive answer. But absolutely, one of them weakened the plant and the other one came in. There is no correlation between blight and scale. You can have scale without blight, you can have blight without scale. However, oyster scale and fire blight both love Cotoneaster. So there was a weakening somewhere and the other one moved in. And these are tenacious. In my description, that is the polite way of saying what I want to say about them. Stubborn little critters. They have a thick shell. They're resistant to most sprays. The best way to treat them is with a dormant spray. What a lot of people were doing. These guys, they're resistant. Even birds can't get them off the branch. So they go down the branch to where they need to be. They lock on and they cover themselves with a shell, with a shell. And then they proceed to suck everything out of that branch and they'll kill the entire branch. And you can't pick them off. Birds can't get them. If you do pick them off, you're going to damage the branch. Like by the time you pull it out, you're pulling out a chunk of wood. They are ridiculously bad to get rid of, to the point where the vast majority of people were just cutting their Cotoneaster hedges down. Now it's Cotoneaster. They all came back. And I'm very pleased to say, between dormant spray kits, treating the blight, pruning, fertilizing, watering, this problem has severely diminished. I walk around now and I'm seeing healthy, lush Cotoneasters everywhere. I'm not seeing these riddled, disease, damaged Cotoneasters. That makes me very, very, very happy. But absolutely, they're still around. We didn't get rid of them. We just hammered them back from being a citywide infestation. But again, I can always find something good to say about these insects. You have to admire the evolutionary process that created them. Something that is just there's no other bug that eats them. Even the birds are like, nope, there's an easier target. This just isn't worth it. And off they go. Now, in the spring, when they're swarming everywhere, yeah, then they're very susceptible because they don't have the shell. But once they get that shell, hard as an oyster, forget about it. The lily beetle. Another one that we've managed to knock back as a city. I need to pick up the pace.
It's so cute.
It's very cute if you don't have lilies.
Yeah.
A lot of people mistake the lily beetle for a ladybird. Couldn't be further from it. They will literally decimate the lily population. People were ripping the lily beds out. They just couldn't take it anymore. Through a concentrated effort of picking them off and using a chemical spray like a trounce, we managed to really, really hammer them back. To the point now, lilies are coming back, which is wonderful to see. The best part about them is that they're bright red, so they're really easy to see. But they're also very, very, very gross. They'll fall off, they'll lay the eggs right in your lily bed, and the eggs come up, and then the young larvae will actually, got to give the facts, they will actually cover themselves in their own poop, so other predators won't eat them. Yeah.
Classy.
Yeah, exactly. It works. I mean, I'm not even going to go any further with that because it's morning time and we're drinking coffee and having breakfast. Leaf miner. The leaf miner is another one. There is nothing good to say about this bug. Great, yeah, okay, it's got a good life tactic, but it is vilified and rightfully so. We just had to take down a 30-foot birch tree because of leaf miner. And the adult will lay the eggs into the leaf between the membranes of the leaf, and the young will go through and eat out the interior of the leaf. So you can't spray them because the spray won't permeate the leaf. They then fall out, they hit the ground, they burrow in, and they cocoon themselves. They come out as an adult, fly up the tree, lay a whole bunch of eggs, and then go to another tree. And then those eggs do the exact same thing. Treatment is next to impossible because they're either underground or they're buried in. Or you're trying to zap a fly this big, literally flying around a 30-foot birch tree. Good luck with that. So the leaf miner is brutal. Fortunately for this one, I got to show this. We have nematodes. You put these in the ground. There's 5 million nematodes in this pack. You follow the application. Basically, it's on a sponge. You put them into the ground. They're tiny. We're going to touch on them in a second. Tiny little worms, and they go kill them. And we're like, oh yeah, thank you, nematode worm. So, good bugs. Yay, way better subject. Basically, what defines a good bug in the garden? We don't really need to know what they eat or what they do. They eat bad bugs. That's it. I could just wrap it up there. Good bugs eat bad bugs. But we'll go into them in a little bit more detail. So the correct name is the ladybird beetle, commonly known as the ladybug. Best PR of any bug on the planet. I don't know who did the PR for the ladybug, but bravo, sir. Yeah, everybody. My mom hates every bug except the ladybug. She'll have it on her hand. She thinks they're beautiful. Any other bug, she screams and throws things at it. The ladybird, she adores. They are voracious. They overwinter. The young are ridiculous. How many aphids they can eat. And they're easy to spot. They are very easy, bright red. You see them walking and they will just decimate aphids. They will also eat mites, but that's kind of like, oh, there's nothing else to eat. I guess I'll look for mites. Fun fact, they really hurt when they bite. Because you have to remember, these are predator bugs. If we disturb them, they can bite us. Do not kill them. It is their instinct. Now we go to the one that has the very worst PR of any bug, the spider. I'm arachnophobic. Funnily enough, I'm arachnophobic inside. I'm not arachnophobic outside. I am not spider friendly outside. If I see a spider outside, I'm like, If I see a spider this close in the house, I'm backing away. It doesn't need to be in my house. There's no bugs in my house. Just leave my house. Go into my garden and we can be friends. But they're amazing. And the great thing about spiders is the bugs they catch in their web. If you go and look, you can see if you have a problem bug. So if there's one mosquito and a couple of aphids and unfortunately maybe a moth or a butterfly, because they will kill anything, you're like, oh, I'm not too worried about that. But if you go and their net is just riddled with aphids, they're telling you a problem. If you have an area where there's 30 spiders, the spiders aren't the problem, they're a predator. They are only there because there is a viable food source. You need to figure out what that food source is, eliminate that, and the spiders will leave. So amazing, amazing creatures. And the next one also does not have good PR, is the centipede. Phenomenally fast, voracious. Fun fact, centipedes don't have a venom in their mouth. Their mouth is purely for eating. The venom is in their front four claws. So they grab a bug. If it's bigger, they'll wrap around it and start scrunching it down. They can climb anywhere. They live through the garden. I'm wary of them because they hurt. If they pinch you, it does hurt. It burns. But I've picked them up absolutely and moved them. The thing I hate about them is I'm moving you to keep you safe. Please do not run up my arm lightning fast. Stay in this area. This area is the friendly area. You can even go on the back of my hand. Do not run up my arm. Do not run up my leg. Not a huge fan of that. But other than that, they're great. If you want to see something fun, look up the red-headed Texas centipede. That's basically what that picture is. They are so big, they'll eat mice. And they live just down in Texas. This isn't some crazy animal in Australia or Africa or the Brazilian rainforest. They live in the southern US. Dragonflies. Who doesn't love a dragonfly? One of my favorites. One of my all-time favorite predator bugs. Maybe my all-time favorite predator bug. They don't necessarily eat the bugs that are damaging our plants, but they make the yard a lot better for us. They'll eat mosquitoes and black flies. If an aphid is flying and they happen to go by, zap, see you later, aphid. If they're flying around a birch tree, they're probably trying to get the any kind of birch leaf miner. And they're absolutely beautiful. And they are, they're deadly. They will just eat all day. If they are bugs, you know when you see dragonflies this big? I saw probably the biggest one ever. It must have been 6 inches long. It landed on me in Fish Creek Park. And I was like, oh boy, you found a good food source. You are loving life. And I am loving that you are here because that means there are significantly less mosquitoes jumping on me. I didn't include mosquitoes because mosquitoes aren't actually a bad bug. We're going to give them a special shout out though. The ground beetle. The ground beetle, it's a blackish, greenish, shiny beetle you see running around. They're awesome.
I love that.
I know, they are so awesome. They're great to pick up. They can bite, again, so be careful if you're picking it up. But they go all night just lumbering around the garden. They'll climb plants. They'll look for all kinds of food. They'll eat anything and everything. They don't care. If it's in that way, it's getting chomped. And they're also known as a dirty pollinator. They're not pollinating because they go into your flower. They're pollinating because they just walk across the flower to go somewhere else. They're like the big oaf of the predator bugs. And I absolutely love seeing them. I love finding them in the garden. When I was, A.A. Milne wrote a really cool poem, and I kept one as a pet because of his poem about the beetle. A.A. Milne, by the way, was the author of Winnie the Pooh. I don't want, because I do that all the time. I hear a name and I'm like, where do I know that name from? And then, of course, the nematodes. They exist naturally. We sell them. These are all nematodes. Tiny roundworms. Like I said, 5 million in this package. When you open this package, the sponge is only that big, that thin, and there's 5 million of them living on that sponge. They go into the soil, and they're pretty gross, to be honest. Zero effect on us, kids, wildlife. Zero effect on anything they're not there to kill. An ant-buster nematode isn't going to go for birch leaf miner. A birch leaf miner nematode isn't going to go for an ant. But when they find the food source that they like, game over. Basically, they burrow into it and suck it dry. And then they move on to the next one. They're kind of gross, and then they lay eggs, and then the eggs do the same thing, and they will just keep propagating as long as there's a food source. We have had phenomenal feedback on our nematodes. Our nematode program has expanded massively in the last 2 years because of public demand. They work 100 times better than any chemical spray. Biological controls are by far the best. I want to give a special shout out to ants, wasps, and mosquitoes. I know we hate them, but they have a purpose. Wasps, there's predator wasps. They will actually eat other bugs, the braconid wasps. Other wasps, like I said, will tell you, hey, there's aphids in this tree, look at us. Ants, they aerate the soil. They get rid of decaying organic matter. If there's another bad bug around that's in their way, they're like, get out of here, we're the ants. I have an ant's nest in my garden. Hasn't gotten much bigger. I'm cool with it. Gets me every year because it's exactly where I stand when I water one of my beds. And I'll be standing either barefoot or wearing my slides, and I'm like, oh, I think it's grass tickling. And I look down and there's ants right. I hose my legs down and I move off. That's it. They don't bother me. They have a purpose. I'm okay with them. But I dig it. We don't want them. We don't want ants crawling all over us. I absolutely understand. So what I'm saying is they're a problem for us. They're not a problem for our garden. Wasps aren't going to eat your plant. Ants aren't going to eat your plant. Mosquitoes pollinate. Fun fact, mosquitoes are responsible for 75% of the world's chocolate. Without the mosquito, all the time people are like, oh, I wish we could have no mosquitoes. I don't. I like chocolate. And I'm not even a chocolate fiend, but I enjoy chocolate. I know some people, I'm not going to name names, but it rhymes with Jenny, would not be impressed if there was no chocolate. Now, I'm not saying you have to love the mosquito. Nothing sucks more than getting bit. But they only need blood to lay their eggs. The rest of the time, they're feeding on plants and they're going to all of your flowers. The male doesn't even bite. He just pollinates. So I want to give them a shout out. Maybe we can understand them a little better and not be like, I hate them, must kill them all. There is something to be said about them. With that being said, of course, you have a massive ant's nest and it makes being in your backyard unenjoyable. Or you have a wasp's nest, or you have standing water, or your neighbor does, and you go outside and you can't even move because of the mosquitoes. I get it. Needs to be, there has to be a treatment in place for that. I'm just saying we don't need to overreact. They're not going to hurt your garden. And then I just want to touch on all of the chemical sprays that are out there, the insecticidal soaps, the fungicides, the applicators to put them in and everything else. They work amazingly, okay? Absolutely, they work. I've sold countless amounts and I still will sell countless amounts. But be aware of other bugs. Like I said, if I had overreacted to those aphids, I might have made the problem worse because I may have killed predator bugs. I might not have seen the predator bug. And I might have gone, oh, aphids, and sprayed everything. Those sprays, they're going to kill any bug they hit. So you may end up killing ladybirds and spiders and whatnot. Use accordingly. Don't panic. If it says 7 to 10 days, use it 7 to 10 days. They've done their research. I have used them accordingly. They work accordingly, I promise. Follow the directions. If you buy a concentrate, people go, oh, I'll do a double batch. So you take a dry powder like this. You make it twice as thick, and then you spray it on the leaves. Well, what ends up happening is now you have a film. You've coated the leaves, and it can't photosynthesize properly. So the cure has become just as bad as the disease. So use the, make sure the safest, read it. If you want to use it, strawberry, but strawberry is listed they've done their research. Use it in a timely manner.